When you picture Lord Vader, you probably see destruction, brutality, the signature breathing cutting through the silence, the crimson blade igniting before a slaughter. In the eyes of the galaxy, Darth Vader is the embodiment of fear, a juggernaut forged in fire. But in truth, he was not born in that fire. He was broken in it. And it wasn't until he was shattered, physically, emotionally, ideologically, that he began to truly become the weapon that we know and remember. This story isn't just about Darth Vader's power, it's about how he built it. Painfully, slowly, methodically. And it's about 2 quiet moments in the lore where that journey was measured, weighed, and tested by the one man who helped mold him into the being that he would become, his master, Darth Sidious. Across the decades of Vader's service to the Empire, there are 2 documented times that Sidious draws his lightsaber against his apprentice. These are not dramatic public executions or sprawling battles. They're personal, intimate, silent trials. They happen behind closed doors, with no witnesses, no fanfare, no applause. Just 2 Sith Lords, blades drawn, and one unspoken question in the air. Who really holds the power now? The first duel we'll explore comes shortly after Mustafar, right after Vader is reconstructed in the iron shell of his new armor and after his first Jedi kill. He's unstable, he's furious, but he's lost. He doesn't know how to fight in his new body. He doesn't even know who he is. But Sidious doesn't care. There are no lessons. There is only cruelty. The duel is a lesson in submission, a reminder that no matter how broken Anakin Skywalker is, he is not yet strong enough to challenge his master, that he really has no chance at all. This is Darth Vader's first introduction into how a Sith duels. The second duel happens decades after this. Vader is hardened, refined. The galaxy fears him. He has killed dozens of Jedi, shaped his own combat style, and carved out his legacy in blood. And once again, his master draws his blade. But this time he is not teaching, he's testing. He's not trying to break Vader anymore. He's checking to see what he's created, what he's allowed to grow in the shadows. And what Palpatine finds nearly scares him. Because while Palpatine may still hold the throne, this time he doesn't walk away the obvious victor. The duel doesn't end with Vader on the ground defeated. It ends with Sidious calling it off, and Vader, precise, still, silent, obedient, holding his blade inches from his master's throat. This moment that we'll be exploring says everything. The 2 duels don't just chart Vader's evolution, they frame it. One marks the death of Anakin, the other marks the emergence of something worse, a Sith Lord so refined, so dangerous, that even the Emperor hesitates to provoke him further. This is the story of how Darth Vader became one of the greatest duelists in galactic history, and how his master, the greatest manipulator the Sith ever produced, knew exactly when to strike and exactly when to stop. The first lesson, to be rebuilt or to be destroyed. The first time that Darth Sidious ever duels Vader, it's not a sparring match, it's not even really a fight. It's a reckoning, an understanding. Vader has emerged from the fires of Mustafar barely alive. The armor is new, his limbs mechanical, his senses dulled by pain and confusion. He's not even sure what he is yet. A Sith Lord, a slave, a shell. But what matters to Sidious isn't what Vader is. What matters is what he must become. And he has no time for any lingering weakness. This is his first lesson in how a Sith approaches a lightsaber duel. Sidious ignites his lightsaber. There is no warning, just a flash of red and a blur of motion. Vader is forced to react. He activates his own blade, and what follows is a short but a savage beatdown. Sidious doesn't just strike hard, he strikes fast, with flawless form, punishing precision, and a cold, calculated smile. Every movement exposes something new. How clumsy Vader has become, how unfamiliar he is with his new body, how deeply he still fights like a Jedi. And that is the problem. Vader is holding back. He's relying on defensive posture, fighting with restraint drilled into him during the Clone Wars and by the Jedi, weaker beings. Sidious sees it all instantly. Vader's instincts are Jedi instincts, and that means that they are weak, hesitant, tethered to outdated philosophies. The Emperor isn't trying to train Vader in this moment, he's trying to rip Anakin Skywalker out of him piece by piece, blow by blow. He wants Vader to stop relying on footwork and agility. Those are gone. He wants him to stop retreating. The armor will not allow it. He wants him to stop surviving like a Jedi. He must kill as a Sith. Vader tries to keep up, but his strikes are sluggish, his balance is off, his center of gravity has changed. The suit makes it far worse, but Sidious doesn't care for any of this. There is no mercy in the rule of two. Only the strong deserve to live. And in this moment, Palpatine makes one thing clear. You are no longer a Jedi. Stop acting like one, or you will die like one. The duel isn't so much about combat, it's about identity. It's a crucifixion of Anakin, a surgical deconstruction of what remains of the man that Sidious manipulated. There is no sympathy in the Emperor, only clinical detachment. He is one of the only beings in the galaxy that understands what Vader really is. Broken. The duel is not the beginning of his Sith training, it's the start of his unlearning. The moment Darth Vader begins to shed his past and to rebuild himself as a weapon of will and fury. And this is where the Jedi purge comes in. Vader's true crucible. Vader's transformation was not just born in Sidious's chambers, it was forged during the Great Purge. Because what Sidious began, Vader would finish. The Clone Wars had taught Anakin the fundamentals of dueling. His power, raw, untapped. His athleticism and improvisation made him one of the greatest swordsmen of the entire era. But that power came with recklessness, ego, a refusal to evolve. As Anakin, he relied utterly on pure talent. But as Vader, he couldn't afford that luxury anymore. And when the purge broke out in full, Vader faced something he had never seen before. He had seen skilled, desperate Jedi fighting for survival. And he wasn't facing them in battlefields anymore. He was hunting them in their sanctuaries, in old ruins, in forgotten temples. These were personal fights, not coordinated war efforts, one-on-one, no backup, no troops, just the lightsaber and will. And at first, Vader struggled. He won, but not cleanly. Jedi exploited his rigidity, exploited his limited mobility, exploited the way he telegraphed power. He was no longer a duelist who could overwhelm with speed or trickery. His combat form had become deliberate, surgical, adaptable. Vader began modifying everything, from his stance to his swing arcs to his footwork. He stopped lunging, he stopped flipping. He started dragging Jedi with his tempo, a slow, relentless rhythm where he controlled the arena, the air, the pressure. He weaponized intimidation. He used the sound of his breath as a psychological weapon. He would force errors just by being silent. He wasn't just executing Jedi anymore, he was studying them. Every duel a lesson, every kill a refinement. And what emerged was a style unlike anything the Jedi had trained for. A blend of Form 5's brute power, Form 2's precision, and something new, the rhythm of inevitability. The Jedi Purge didn't just destroy the Order, it reshaped Vader, because for the first time he was teachable, not by a mentor, but by failure, and that made him more dangerous than ever. He was no longer simply powerful, he was methodical. He understood reach, timing, leverage, and he understood fear, his stillness. Vader turned the limitations of his armor into strengths. He fought as a wall of inevitability, and most terrifying of all, he was still getting better. It is now where we reach the test, Hidden Empire. Years later, we reach the second sparring session, the second duel, a quiet test framed by deception and failure. Vader has just failed to convert Luke Skywalker on Bespin, and while most of the galaxy remains unaware, Sidious knows. He senses a shift. He sees the cracks in his apprentice, and so once again, the Emperor draws his blade. But this time, it's way different. It's no longer just a lesson. Palpatine doesn't duel him in rage. He doesn't lecture him about Jedi restraint. He doesn't need to. He's not punishing him, he's studying him. This is not a lesson, this is a test. And the results of that test are terrifying. Vader no longer fights like a confused, broken Jedi trying to earn favor. He fights as a Dark Lord, a cold, calculating, deeply disciplined destroyer. The duel is brief, but it is charged. Vader moves with purpose. His blade flows with terrifying precision. His stance, his timing, even his restraint, all of it refined. Palpatine meets him with speed and aggression, and for a moment it seems as if the Emperor has the upper hand. He presses Vader, pushes him back, tests the edges of his precision with fast, brutal strikes. It's a flurry designed not to kill, but to see how close he can get. And then, just as the pace builds to a crescendo, Sidious says one word: enough. Mid-swing, mid-duel. This is not because he has won, it's because he's seen what he needs to see. Vader freezes, his saber held up, still active. dangerously close to his master's head. That moment is everything, because in their first duel, Sidious stopped because Vader could no longer keep up. In this duel, he stops because Vader could win. The word speaks volumes, but it's what happens after the word that speaks even more. Vader does not immediately lower his blade. He doesn't deactivate it out of obedience. For a brief second, he holds it there, near his master's face, active, still, contained. It's not a threat, it's a revelation. Because now Sidious knows what he has created. He knows this isn't Anakin trying to prove himself. This isn't a Jedi desperate for approval. This is a Sith forged through pain, battle, and death. One who has learned restraint not out of weakness, but out of discipline. Sidious is not afraid of the blade. He's afraid of what it means. Vader is no longer chained by uncertainty, no longer relying on fury to mask his confusion. He has become something colder, focused. The storm has been honed, all the fear, all the hate weaponized. And Sidious recognizes this all instantly. He ends the duel not by overpowering his apprentice, but by commanding him. Because he has to. He doesn't disarm him. He doesn't land a killing strike. He simply speaks, and counts on the one remaining chain that holds Vader in place, his psychological control. This is the true dynamic between the Sith, not master and apprentice, but warden and weapon. And the weapon is beginning to think for itself here. In the second duel, Sidious is not facing a broken Jedi. He's facing a fully formed Dark Lord, one of his own design. One who has embraced the original lessons taught to him that day on Coruscant, in their first duel. Darth Vader's strength no longer solely lies in rage, it lies in control, in clarity, in efficiency. The duel is important not because of who wins, but because of what it reveals. Sidious never intended to kill Vader. He never feared being struck down, not physically. What he feared was what the moment meant, and so the duel becomes a conversation. One spoken in blade strokes and halted strikes, one that ends with no victor, but rather with a choice. Vader chooses not to kill. But he doesn't choose this because he's afraid. He stops because he's still bound, not by the Force, not even by weakness, but by the one thing that Palpatine still controls, his mind. That is the final truth of their dynamic. In their first duel, Sidious won because Vader was physically inferior. In their second, he ends it because Vader is no longer physically beatable. At least not unless Palpatine needs to push himself to his utmost limits, and even then it's unclear. But what is clear is that Palpatine controls the only thing that matters, the outcome, because he controls the will behind the weapon. And that's what the Sith have always understood. In the end, it was never about teaching or testing, it is always about control. And for Darth Vader, for all of his power, remains the sharpest blade in Palpatine's arsenal, one forged in fire, tempered in war, and forever held in the Emperor's grasp, at least until it decides to turn. But anyway, my friends, lore junkies, and fellow acolytes and students of the Force, what are your thoughts on the growing analysis between Vader and Palpatine in their two sparring sessions in the lore? What are your thoughts on the story that it tells, and the ultimate evolution of Lord Vader and his relationship with his master, Darth Sidious? As always, my friends, thank you so much for joining us here in the archives today, and as always, may the Force be with you.